Is certainly faced with various issues at this point.
Legal issues.
I'd say. Of course, there are a number of issues pertaining to corruption with regards to holding the constitution in abeyance, as well as mutiny, as well
in
as in the past, but at this particular juncture as well. The reason why I say this, of course, constitution is a sacred book, and we derive, as citizens of Pakistan, we derive all of our rights and are working within whether it's a political sphere or the social sphere. When the courts transgress through their power or their authority and try into the matters of the executive or the legislature, and this is where the problem crops up. Now, the law should be the same for everybody, and I have a very principled stance on this, that the law and its applicability should be across the board.
Across the board.
This is, I think, a mere allegation that these cases are politically motivated. These are not politically motivated cases. Of course, we've seen examples where our national security has been put at stake, where the Toshakhana cases, where state gifts have been stolen, or perhaps forged receipts have been made so as to claim that a price has been paid according to the rules, when that has not been the case. That's a daylight robbery. That is a daylight robbery. I like to, and we're being used as a rubber stamp. We don't have any meaningful role in the appointment of judges.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hello and welcome to program Inside in Videos English Pakistan. Pakistan is a country where there are always legal and constitutional issues, and these issues never end. Legal and constitutional issues are always part of the political system, and government tries its level best to settle political, constitutional, legal issues. When we talk of legal and constitutional issues, it's legislation, it's amendments, it's government taking up certain cases through filing of references before Supreme Court of Pakistan. And the biggest representative of the government is the Attorney General of Pakistan, who represents the federal government before the apex courts and presents government viewpoint on various issues. And to assist the government in legal and constitutional matters, government has a huge team. And among those team members, we have with us today Barrister Akil Malik, who is a legal and constitutional expert and legal and constitutional spokesman, and also advisor to the Ministry of Law and Justice. Barrister Akil Malik, very warm welcome to program Inside in Videos English. And we would like to know, what are the legal and constitutional priorities of this government? As I said in the beginning, legal issues, constitutional issues are always there, and governments always worried how to tackle legal and constitutional issues. And there is no time. These issues can emerge anytime and pose a very serious challenge.
Certainly. Thank you very much, Mateen Saab, for having me on your show. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you and to be able to discuss.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. And to be able to discuss these very pertinent issues that do crop up from time to time.
Exactly.
And I think, generally speaking, in any part of the world, in any country, you can see that there are legal issues that do crop up from time to time.
Exactly.
Constitutional issues, to be precise. Of course, we've had our fair share of those issues since the independence, actually. And I certainly feel there's always room for improvement. Pakistan is no less in terms of having not only having to face these issues, but having to deal with these issues and having to address those from time to time. Whether you call it the lawyers' movement, whether the Provisional Constitutional Order, the PCO, and then restoration of democracy in Pakistan, and it's a continuous struggle.
Exactly.
To say the least. The government at this point in time, the question that you've asked, so as to address that and answer this, the government is certainly faced with various issues at this point. Legal issues, I'd say. Of course, there are a number of issues pertaining to corruption with regards to holding the constitution in abeyance, as well as mutiny, as well
in
as in the past, but at this particular juncture as well. And the reason why I say this, of course, we've had anti-terrorism courts that are, they've had their hands full with various cases
working properly, independently.
Of course, all our courts, whether it's the Supreme Court or the High Court or the subordinate courts, they are working independently. There are issues, of course, that do crop up from time to time, and of course, we've seen that with the 6 judges writing the letter to their Chief Justice, and even in the past as well, with one honourable judge of the High Court on the floor of the bar addressing through his speech, he had of course stated, and this is obviously when our party was in opposition. So these issues do crop up, but at this particular moment, the government is definitely ensuring rule of law, respect for all the fundamental rights, as well as protection of those fundamental rights, rather than
sorry for interruption, at a time when issue is being raised that fundamental rights are at stake.
Indeed, and I think at any particular time, fundamental rights are obviously should be held in the highest regard by not only just the government of the day, but also by the courts, by the executive, by anybody, and by fellow citizens as well. And the reason why I say this, of course, Constitution is a sacred book. And we derive, as citizens of Pakistan, we derive all of our rights and are working within, whether it's a political sphere or the social sphere, in Pakistan and within those parameters of the Constitution. So those rights definitely are of utmost importance, and the government is ensuring if there is a violation, of course, that gets addressed day in, day out in the courts. You've seen, of course, there's writ jurisdiction, there's public litigation as well in the Supreme Court as well as the High Court. And we've seen that where a citizen feels that their right is being violated, they approach the court as well.
They approach the court of law. You said very beautifully that rule of law is important, number one. And number two, delivery of justice to the people is of paramount importance. How this government is ensuring that the justice has to be delivered to the common man, keeping in view in today's latest report, where from Supreme Court to the High Courts, the number of cases, petitions, applications which are pending are crossing a record bracket. So why this is happening and how to handle this?
It's a very pertinent question that you've asked, and a very pivotal one. And the reason for saying so is that there's trichotomy of powers. There's the executive, there's the legislature, and the judiciary. Having said that, Mateen Saab, the problem is that we all have to work, all these three, with the pillars concept of separation of power, we have to work within our constitutional framework. The problem that we see day in, day out is transgressing into each other's jurisdiction and matters.
Exactly.
And this is where the problem arises. Having said this, it's very interesting because obviously judges, to a certain extent, when I studied law, of course, in the UK, there was obviously a concept that are judges lawmakers? To a certain extent, I would say yes, because obviously if a piece of legislation, if a law is in violation of the Constitution or is ultra-vires to the Constitution, then they can actually strike that down. And of course, they can, to a certain extent, put forward recommendations as well to the parliament or the legislature so as to consider this in that broader perspective. The issue arises when, and this we've seen for the past, let's say, 2-3 decades. The problem that persists is when the courts transgress through their power or their authority and try into the matters of the executive or the legislature. And this is where the problem crops up. Of course, it has been a hot topic for years now that we should have a separate constitutional courts, and I think this is possibly a viable solution, having separate constitutional courts where matters pertaining to the constitution are dealt with those constitutional courts, and everyday working of normal cases and normal courts, whether that pertains to property, criminal matters, civil matters, family matters, other issues, they are to be dealt with these courts separately altogether.
One thing that all successive governments have been facing, as you mentioned earlier, that our cordial relationship is an important part of this democratic process, but successive governments in Pakistan had a turbulent relations with the judiciary, and the reason is whenever judiciary has given decisions, the decisions have never been implemented by the executive. That has become a tendency. An XY politician gets relief from these apex court, and the sitting government gets annoyed. And if the sitting government gets relief from the apex government, the other party gets annoyed. So first tell us why governments have been reluctant in implementing the decisions of the superior judiciary.
Again, a very, very good question. We'll take a start with this, that I agree to disagree. And the reason why I say this is because that's not always the case. It's of course seen, and that's a very generic statement or a question perhaps you can say. There have been instances where the government has been reluctant to, and those are very few instances. Not everyday work, obviously, everyday directions from the courts. Of course, they are implemented. They are held in the highest regard, and of course, we do follow whatever orders there are in true letter and spirit. But having said that, some orders where the government feels that it's the government is actually perhaps, so for the lack of a better word or example, I can say this, is where the government feels that the government's right has been violated, or perhaps it's not in accordance with the government's policy on a certain issue. Then of course there are avenues to appeal it, and the government does appeal it. Hence, following that particular order or judgment in true letter and spirit right there and then might not be the case. But because of the fact that the government has actually appealed or assailed that order at a higher forum such as Supreme Court.
So we have heard a couple of weeks back, Prime Minister decided in a meeting to hire one of the finest legal consultant in order to provide support to the different ministries, particularly to FPR, because there are hundreds and thousands of pending cases before different courts. So what is this tendency that cases are in pending, companies, groups, corporate groups get stay order, and system is jammed? So do you think when the government will pay millions of rupees to these new law consultants, will they be able to resolve this situation?
I think to a greater extent, and the reason why I say this is I was actually part of that meeting on the FPR.
You were part of that.
I was part of that meeting. The Prime Minister chaired that meeting, and of course, many examples were discussed. You see the Western world where we see that we want to compete with the Western world or the developed nations, but at the same time, they have a pool of great legal minds. In our case, the problem is, and very respectfully, I'd like to state this, that we lawyers are also part of the problem, where we obtain injunctions. We unnecessarily delay proceedings
by not appearing before the court timely,
perhaps,
and then requesting some time that it could be further delayed.
Course. And there's a plethora of backlog of litigation, especially with regards to the taxation or the inland revenue services, where because of those injunctions or because of those appeals that are pending, or the list that is pending before the courts, where the government is unable to claim the tax that's actually due.
Exactly. So that's right. You mentioned earlier about corruption. When a common man is indulged in few thousand rupees corruption, the law is immediately applied and the person is arrested. And when elite, regardless of any political party, former presidents, prime ministers, they have been indulged in corruption cases. Corruption cases have been before courts of law. So the elite or the former elites, so they go easily free from the law, and a common man is arrested. So how would you like to comment on this? Is law is only for a common man, not for the elites, not for the king?
No, the law should be the same for everybody. And I have a very principled stance on this, that the law and its applicability should be across the board.
Across the board.
And should be for everybody. It is very unfortunate that we have seen in the past where the law or its application has been very selective. Of course, a lot of the times, we use this word, perhaps the blue-eyed or certain special people from a particular social class or social stature, they sort of get their way out, or they get some sort of favorable treatment. And of course, that's wrong, because the law should be applied across the board and equally to all, whether that's a common man, whether that's somebody who's well-to-do, or whether that's somebody who might be super well-connected. Because of the fact that how we form nations, how nations are made, is when there's a respect for rule of law
exactly.
and applicability of law across the board to all social classes and social statures.
Founder chairman of PTI says that cases against him are politically motivated. And during every talk he makes during the court proceedings inside in the jail premises, he said most of the cases are politically motivated and doesn't have any substance, any evidence against him. So how would you comment on his statement that are these all cases against PTI founder chairman are politically motivated?
No, I strongly disagree with this. These cases are actually not politically motivated, to say the least. I've actually been part of
certain meetings.
No. I've actually observed a hearing in Adiala jail, in the central jail in Rawalpindi, and having seen the conduct of the accused, who is least bothered in the proceedings itself of what's actually happening, and having to make a case or trying to prove a case for himself, was actually more interested in talking to the media. This is, I think, a mere allegation that these cases are politically motivated. These are not politically motivated cases. Of course, we've seen examples where our national security has been put at stake, where the Toshakhana cases, where state gifts have been stolen, or perhaps forged receipts have been made so as to claim that a price has been paid according to the rules, when that has not been the case, where you've had cases such as forming a trust and trying to sort of launder money, or trying to get sort of kickbacks from that particular trust. And I'm talking about Al-Qadr case, 190 million pounds. We do see that. That's a daylight robbery. That is a daylight robbery, I like to state, in front of everybody, in front of the entire nation. And the reason why I say this, of course, we know, the nation knows, everybody knows, these were the funds, or this money actually belonged to the government of Pakistan.
Exactly.
That actually landed in the account of the Supreme Court, was then used to pay fine in another province, and a blanket cabinet approval was taken without having to show them or any discussion or any document to that effect.
Exactly.
So but I, as a student of law and as a lawyer myself, that is actually a very clear case. So these cases, I beg to differ, are not politically motivated. These cases are actually based on merit.
And most of the courts are acquitting him.
In roughly or approximately about 203 cases, so as to be a little bit more precise, in majority of those cases, the same courts have actually granted relief to him. So I think it's not just for him to question or claim or even complain on the fact that the courts are not independent. The courts are very much independent. These are the same courts that have granted relief time and again to him, to his party members, and to his co-accused as well. So this claim that the courts are not independent or there is no rule of law in Pakistan is actually a very unjustified claim.
So audience wanted to know from you, because Pakistan is a progressive country moving forward. Investment is taking place, SIFC and these all things. Tell us, this is the beginning of the new government. What sort of constitutional and legal packages government is working? And in the days to come in the parliament, what type of constitutional or legal amendments or packages government is working, which is basically meant to ease the life of the common man?
So there are various constitutional amendments under discussion. I probably wouldn't be at liberty to name all of them, or so as to point towards them. But I think there's always room for improvement in constitution. It's a man-made document, and with the passage of time, with the advent in technology, with the times that are changing, I think there's a dire need to make certain constitutional amendments. So as to speak, speaking of rule of law and judiciary, I would certainly say that as a student of law again, I see disparity and inequality between the ages of the High Court judge and the Supreme Court judge. So that has to be brought in parity and equality, because a Supreme Court judge retires at 65, whereas the High Court judge retires at 62. So we do have to, and our constitution actually speaks about equality, Article 25. So there are certain, little bits and pieces that have to be plugged in or tweaked in. Certain amendments have to be brought forward. And again, I think we as parliamentarians with the parliamentary committee, we're being used as a rubber stamp. We don't have any meaningful role in the appointment of judges. And once when we are actually represented,
parliamentary committee, and then the Supreme Court of Pakistan's committee, and
of course, but I think we are being used as a rubber stamp, and I think we need to have
parliament.
Yes, of course. In such appointments, we need to have meaningful input in the entire process, because obviously we are the representative of the people. And if we are representing thousands or hundreds of thousands of people collectively, then our say should also have that value. Our input should also have that sort of value, as opposed to just being used as a rubber stamp. So apart from that, laws such as for the government as well, we've just recently moved. I had moved the tax amendments law, where we are actually bringing this new talent. We are sort of trying to lessen the burden on the tribunals, on the courts, with effective and fast-paced disposal of these cases that have been pending for years.
So tell us precisely that various governments have been working actively on judicial and election reforms, but this process was never completed. The previous government, PTI government, initiated election reforms. PMLN never cooperated. So why political parties are not ready to cooperate with each other on election reforms, which these reforms are need of the hour, and on the other hand, the judicial reforms? Your thoughts?
We actually did cooperate in the last government. Actually, if you remember, before 2018 elections, it was actually our government in 2017 that actually brought the amendments within the Election Act of 2017.
True.
Of course, some amendments have been reverted back to their original form, such as the recent amendment. But having said that, I personally feel that PTI makes these told claims, but actually they haven't really done any sort of concrete or constructive work on the election reforms or election laws or electoral reforms. And the reason why I say this, Election Commission of Pakistan as the regulator had about 32 or 33 issues that they had highlighted with the proposal that PTI had actually put forward in terms of electoral reforms. They never actually bothered addressing them. Going to perhaps, I think the direction where you headed is e-voting or e-machines.
E-voting, exactly. They introduced and they believe that this will bring transparency.
I, again,
and fair election.
Disagree with the entire concept of e-voting or electoral voting. I mean, look at Britain. They don't have e-voting. They tried it once, as to what I've read. And it's not very so as to say, transparent or reliable method of voting. Of course, we do have that in the US, but India, again, and there are many other examples where e-voting or electronic voting is not used, because you do remember in 2020 when Trump had the election, of course, he had alleged that my votes were stolen from certain states, and that's e-voting. And again, there's another country where they were saying that our election has been stolen by that country because the system was hacked. So e-voting can have many repercussions or issues that then crop up with this new system. So why can't we just effectively manage and perhaps improve on the existing system that we have already? We have the manpower. We have a system in place. We just need to work on that particular system so as to make those improvements within the existing system, so that all the political parties should be able to agree on the system in place at this particular time.
But finally, I would like to just remind you, in the beginning, you said Constitution is a sacred book. When it is a sacred book, how to ensure that every state institution must respect it? And if it is respected, then Pakistan will be a country known as a country which respects law, which respects Constitution, and perhaps 99% of our issues will be automatically resolved. So how to ensure in the coming days that the Constitution will be respected by all?
I think as a nation, there's a lot of introspection that we have to do for ourselves as individual citizens, as well as there's a lot of introspection for the institutions as well. Like I said earlier on at the start of the interview, these institutes have to realize and put a stop to transgressing or trying to violate or have, when violating their constitutional domain and trying to transgress from their authority and meddle into the affairs or perhaps the authority of the other institution. So institutions and citizens alike, we definitely have to take that responsibility for ourselves. And we've got to decide if we work within the constitutional framework that is within the Constitution, whether that's for a citizen or whether that's for an institute, we'll only be able to flourish and succeed once we decide to remain within that constitutional framework and domain and exercise our powers within and our rights within that particular domain.
Tell us, our viewers, about common man who interact and who deals and who is directly facing the lower judiciary. Any plan government is working to improve conditions of lower judiciary, to make reforms, to make improvements, so that the justice may quickly be delivered to the common man at the grassroots level? There's civil judges, the additional judges, and these all courts at the district level.
There's obviously, with the passage of time, with various governments, with the international community, we've been working on the capacity building of these and trainings of these judges from the lower judiciary.
Any progress made?
There has been a lot of progress that's been made. We do have model courts as well now.
Model
courts in Punjab, of course. There's e-courts as well, where litigants don't have to appear in person, and they can choose to appear through an e-court if they have to, be examined or be cross-examined or give a statement. So that's possible. We also have made some improvements within the policing system as well. So, of course, that's also been digitized and with regards to gender issues, with regards to anti-rape cells, with regards to women police stations. So, of course, work is being carried out, but it's very slow and steady. We just need to allow for it for all of it to come together, so you can see difference in reality as well, as opposed to just me sitting here claiming that difference is being made or there are changes being made. But of course, when we come to the end of our term, after 5 years, then you will certainly see a lot of improvement and change.
Last only that you said a lot of amendments and constitutional and legal packages are being worked out. Are you confident that once these things will be presented in Parliament, you will get cooperation of other coalition partners in getting these amendments easily passed?
I think a lot of it boils down to the reserve seats case at this point in time, which is actually sub judice before the Supreme Court of Pakistan. And whenever that gets decided and whatever the decision is, whether, these seats will come to the parties, the parliamentary parties or political parties present in the parliament on the case of proportional representation, or whether these will go to the opposition parties, or whether these will go to, or these will be left alone altogether, and some new formula will be worked out in terms of deciding the 2/3 majority. So until and unless a political party and its alliance members, they have a 2/3 majority, we are unable to carry out any constitutional amendments. So with the once this is decided, actually, then we'll be able to see if we are able to carry out any constitutional amendments to begin with. But whatever constitutional amendments might be there, we certainly would be able to work with various institutions and various other political parties as well on both the Treasury and the opposition benches, so as to bring them together and get them to agree on at least the good constitutional amendments, because I think that's, again, a very vague justification or argument or explanation, so to speak. But I think it's for each political party to see how they sort of get affected by that constitutional amendment.
True. Thank you so much indeed, Barrister Aqil Malik, for speaking to program Insight in V News English. And dear viewers, as Barrister Aqil Malik is the spokesperson for law and constitutional matters to the government of Pakistan. He said Pakistan's future is with the rule of law. Pakistan's future is with the respect of the constitution by all. Till our next program, goodbye and Allah Hafiz from our studios.